Hey everybody, and today we're doing my wrap-up. So we're doing the wrap-up for the month of March. Don't know when you guys are going to be seeing this, because I'm gonna still try to get my wrap-ups out in order, which means that this one is definitely not the first one up, because I'm still very much behind. But so I am going to be filming part of my wrap-up today because I need to get some books back to the library. The month is not done yet. I am still very much hoping to finish one more book this month, but I do need to do quite a lot of reading this 2 days of the month, so today and tomorrow, in order to get there. So I think I'm now on like page 80 of like 400 and something. So is this possible? Potentially not, but let's give this a go. I'm also seated in like a super uncomfortable position, so love that for me. But so first thing to talk about is the library books, just because of the fact that I need to return those today. So ow, this is, yeah, now I have to reset my camera, of course, to get to this angle. Alright, much better. So, first book is my book club book, like not really book club, read-along book. So I'm doing a dragon-based read-along this year. This is the second month of the read-along, and this month we are starting this series, so the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams, with the first book being The Ninth Reign. In this one we're following, do we have 3 perspectives? I think we have 3 perspectives, right? So we're following a character who's basically part of this sort of like immortal vampirical race, who basically they were like super powerful, their society was prospering, they were prospering under the guidance of their sort of god, which is a tree that basically would blossom fruit that would create a sort of like war beast that would help them out whenever there was an attack by a enemy. And each of these attacks is referred, or each of these times in which, you know, this fruit would sprout is referred to as a reign. And so we've had 8 reigns, and they're kind of worried about the fate of what will happen when another attack comes, because the tree at this point in time is basically dying. It's not really responding anymore, it doesn't have any fruit anymore, they cannot live off of the tree anymore, and so they have to live off of humans' blood. He is then at some point in this story, or in the past of this story, recruited by a woman who is a sort of like scholar of all of the history surrounding all of this, and they together roam the country trying to find answers. And along their way they stumble into a mysterious young woman who has basically just escaped from a institution that basically keeps women controlled, women who have certain magical or powers. It's not necessarily, I think, to refer to as magic, but so they stumble into her, she kind of hides her identity, and the story sets off from there. I really enjoyed this one a whole lot. I think it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed reading from these perspectives. I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed learning more about not just the history of this world, but also, you know, the idea of the history of this sort of institution that's keeping women controlled, and kind of trying to figure out, you know, what happened and what was going to happen. So I'm very eager to see what will happen with the next one, because I feel like, you know, we've set up book 2 definitely, but I wonder what more we're going to be like uncovering or trying to figure out in book 2, because that was definitely part of my enjoyment in book 1, was kind of like that sort of like figuring out the world and figuring out elements of the world building, and I hope that we will get more of that in book 2. 2 more books from the library got read this month. The second one is Palestine by Joe Sacco. So this is a graphic novel featuring the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not the current conflict. I mean, current conflict has its roots going back like 80 years or something like that, but this is a book published at the beginning of the 2000s, I think, and it's him going to Palestine and Israel and kind of interviewing people there, and it's basically an account of his time there, and an account of the stories that people have to tell about their treatment by Israeli soldiers, and then on the Israeli side their sort of like prejudices towards the Palestinians, their fears of the Palestinians. It's mainly focusing on on the Palestinians. There's not a whole ton of focus on the Israeli side of the story, which he also explains, saying like the only thing that you hear on TV nowadays is a little bit different, luckily, but the only things you used to hear is the Israeli side of things, and so he wanted to highlight the Palestinian side of things. This, of course, is a very dark, bleak, miserable read, so you know, it's not what you typically look for in a comic book, and as a consequence this is also not your typical comic book read where you can just like fly through it and finish it in one day, even though it's more than 200 pages. I definitely had to take some time with it to, you know, allow for myself to, you know, take the time with it, because going through this in one go is miserable. And then the final thing that I have from the library is another graphic novel, and that is The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins. This is also a comic book graphic novel. Never really sure about the difference, but this is a story about a world in which everything is in order, everything is neat, arranged, you know, everything has a structure to it. And then one day, our protagonist, who always had this sort of like one hair that was stubbornly like refusing to be cut from his face, would always grow back. One day that starts to sprout into more and more and more hair until he grows a massive beard, a beard that won't stop growing. And so it's about what's the impact of disorder to society or to somebody who values perfection above all things, but also showing how, you know, when perfection is something that, you know, society and a lot of things try to tell us, you know, we should reach for. However, this book is kind of also trying to show us that sometimes a little bit of imperfection, a little bit of chaos, a little bit of the unruly can also have a huge impact on us, and can have a huge impact on allowing ourselves to breathe a little bit, allowing ourselves some more mental space. Really enjoyed this one a whole lot, and this is one of those that, yes, you can definitely fly through, especially since this one also has like much less text in it. You know, there are definitely like even pages, like if we look at a page like this, there's like barely any text on either one of these pages, whereas in the Palestine book, because they are testimonials, a lot of the time there will be a ton of text on a single page. So it's not necessarily the case that, you know, because it's a comic book, you're getting less words in than you would with an actual traditionally formatted book. But so yeah, what else am I going to talk about here? So I also listened to Murderbot 5 by, why can I not come up with the name of the author, Martha Wells. So of course this is a book in the series, so I'm not going to talk about the actual book itself. This is the longest book in the series so far. In the series we're looking at a robot called Murderbot, but that's basically the name he gives himself. He basically hacked the sort of like part of his brain, so to speak, that is controlled by the company that made him, and so now he is independent in his choices and in his behavior. And in book 1 he is basically put on an assignment where he's just, you know, biding his time, making sure nobody realizes what he has done until, you know, some weird stuff start to happen around him and he feels compelled to save the humans in his crew. And yeah, I've enjoyed this. I think I previously indicated that I feel like I do definitely need a full re-listen of Murderbot at some point in time to get the sort of like backstory more in order. I'm always following along to the actions of each individual book, but there's a lot of, at this point in time, there's a lot being built off of what has happened in earlier books, and when those get mentioned, I'm kind of lost again, because I'm like, oh wait, what was the deal again with that? So I feel like I'm kind of getting lost there a little bit. And in this 5th book, it's the longest one in the series so far. Did I enjoy that longer length? Not necessarily. I do enjoy some banter that was there between two of the characters, but I feel like at this point in time, my lack of sort of like following along to the rest of the series is starting to bleed into my enjoyments. Like it's starting to cut out some of my enjoyment for this series. Then I'm trying to figure out if there's something else that I listen to that I don't physically own. Probably, but I do have to film another clip for this in any case tomorrow, so let's just continue with the ones that I actually physically have lying around here. big part of this month is The Light of All That Falls by James Islington. So this is the third book in the Lycanius trilogy, as this is the third book. Once again, I won't say much about this individual volume in the series. This is a series in which we are basically looking at mainly 3 perspectives, let's call them 4, but the 4th one I won't say much about in my synopsis. So we start off with 3 friends in this sort of magical academy. They're at the eve of their sort of like, not really graduating ceremony, but a trial that they have to take in order to see whether they can continue their studies or whether they continue being magicians or whether their powers need to be bound. In any case, their powers to some extent are already bound, because in this world there has been a conflict between magical people and non-magical people, and as a consequence the magical people have been bound to some sort of a set of rules, and a set of rules that they are compelled to comply. You know, they cannot even break them if they wanted to break them. And as a consequence, there is a lot of bad blood towards gifted people, and when they go out into regular society, for example, they definitely have to tread carefully, and they definitely are exposed to a lot of injustices as well. And our group of 3 friends are at the onset of this trial, but one of them is a little bit unsure about whether he will be able to complete the trial, because he has been struggling with this magic ever since it woke up 3 years ago. He has not been able to use his magic in the meantime, and so he's fearing that when the trial comes around he won't be able to pass. But on the eve before this trial, he is visited by one of the elders who gives him an alternative path, and so 2 of our 3 friends will be branching off in one direction. The 3rd one will stick around for a different life path, and then along the way we meet a 4th character, which that will be our main cast for the entire series. In this 3rd and final book, I enjoyed it a lot. It's a 5-star read. I definitely mainly enjoyed the way in which it all comes together. I think this book has its flaws. There are structural things that, you know, you can point out to. There are some deus ex machinas in there that, you know, even in the moment I was just like, okay, right, that's pretty convenient. But altogether, I think you can clearly see that this was thought out from the beginning, that we've been always working towards this ending, and this ending was really satisfying in the way that it brought everything together. And so yeah, I've just really enjoyed reading from these characters, trying to figure out what was going to come next. Are there other directions this could have gone in that I would have also really enjoyed? Definitely, but I also enjoyed what I ended up reading as what the author intended. That was also definitely worthwhile, even though this has like a time jump, which I don't like, even though one of the characters is visited less than in previous books, which structurally I don't find very appealing. I wasn't necessarily as bothered, because I also did not care as much about his chapters within this book, probably because his story was less important this time around. But so yeah, I really enjoyed the series a whole lot. I really want to reread it again one day, to, now that I know where this was all leading to, be able to kind of, you know, see all the tiny bits and pieces that went into that revelation towards the end. And I will still try to film also a How About That Ending episode for this book, mainly so that I remember the ending in a few years' time. And then the final thing that I've so far physically finished, and I finished that just last night, is The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hashem. This is a Illumicrate edition for it. It is the first book in a series. It is a enemies to lover Egyptian-inspired fantasy. So we have our protagonist, who goes by the name Sylvia, who is a Jasadi. She's actually secretly the Jasad Heir, but nobody who is currently alive knows of her identity. And so she is basically hiding away in one of the other kingdoms after her kingdom, Jasad, has been basically betrayed by the other kingdoms and basically completely overruled. And so anybody who is found to be a Jasadi at this point in time is basically brought to justice, as it is referred to. And so our protagonist Sylvia is trying to get by, fly by under the radar. She's had a traumatic upbringing since the kingdom has taken a tumble down, and she has found an environment that suits her now and is just trying to get by like this. Till she catches the eye of one of the enemy soldiers, who she ends up having to kill after he finds out that she is a Jasadi. Already anxious about the prospect of being found out to be a Jasadi, or found out to have killed one of the enemy soldiers, she then also stumbles upon the the heir to the enemy kingdom, and he seems to take a particular interest in her. This is also somewhat of a games plot. It has a big games element to it. It has a big game or competition element to it as well for those interested. It is enemies to lovers, and I will say that it is so slow burn, which I know a lot of people like. I am of two ways about that. I kind of, you know, while reading it, I am like, it does push me forward to get to that sort of moment in which they both realize or admit their feelings for one another. But at the same time, it also irks me and just aggravates me how long it takes to get there. And I will say that because of the fact that you have an enemies to lover here between, like, they're actual enemies, you know, they're like, she is the heir to a kingdom, he is part of the kingdom that destroyed hers. Like, you know, there's definitely some well-deserved bad blood between the two of them, and you know, that also makes it more difficult to root for them. Aside from that, he just treats her super poorly a lot of the time, which is just like, you know, I don't know whether I should be rooting for this romance. And yeah, so in the end, I'm of two minds about this book. I did enjoy it. I did go through it rather quickly. While I was reading it, I was never bored. I was always wanting to continue. But was it satisfying? No. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening, whether I continue on with it when the second book finally comes out. I also still read The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is a sci-fi dystopian, you know, low sci-fi, I would say, literary fiction translated work. It is translated from Japanese. We are looking at this island where things disappear, and it's not necessarily the items themselves disappeared, it's people's knowledge and understanding of what the thing is. And there's this police force known as the Memory Police who go about the island trying to locate people who actually do still conserve their memories of these things. And so as the story progresses, more and more and more things start to disappear, and they start to become more impactful things as well. You know, we will see at some point that, you know, some point in the history, music boxes disappeared, for example. But our protagonist, who is an author, also starts to worry what will happen if language, for example, were to disappear. And we will see some future disappearances that definitely have a bigger impact on this situation. Now, a lot of people complain about the fact that you don't get any answers, and I particularly knew this going in, and I wasn't necessarily bothered about that idea, but I do feel like it left me feeling conflicted in the sense of, like, I'm not sure what the point was, what the author was trying to bring across, what she was trying to talk about, because a story like this probably has a clear indication that it's condemning certain behaviors, and I don't necessarily know that I fully understand what it is condemning, and as a consequence, I'm not entirely sure that I got much out of this. This also has a story within the story, and I really enjoyed the story within the story most. And there's a big section of the book in which we kind of leave the story within the story, and which definitely was not ideal for me. It made sense, but it was not ideal for me, but I definitely did still enjoy it, but just like, it's just like a meh read for me, you know. There were things that worked about it, but ultimately I just felt like, I don't really know what the point of it was, and whether I personally, for example, got much out of this. Alright, so I did still finish Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. So this is the final book for my March wrap-up, but I forgot a few, so I'll talk about a few others. And this has so much glare that it's just like the light is disappearing from my face, so I have to hold it in this exact position apparently to get a beautiful reflection on my face. But Some Desperate Glory is a sci-fi debut. The author has some fantasy novellas, but it's her first sci-fi novel. And this one actually has just been nominated for the Hugo Awards as well. This is a story about a young girl who is part of this sort of like militarized society. Earth has been destroyed. I don't know how many years in the past, and the remnants of humanity have gathered together to try and survive, maintain a society, and to get revenge. And our protagonist is sort of a one-off. They are these sort of like enhanced human beings. Most of them are basically like raised as individuals. There are no sort of like family ties, but she actually does have a brother and a sister, though her sister is a traitor. And so our protagonist is like top of her class. She is hoping to get a big assignment to go to, you know, like a war unit, or maybe even go all the way to command. However, when she gets her assignment, she is assigned to the nursery and to breed future soldiers for human race. And story kind of sets off from there. I really enjoyed this one a whole lot. It has trigger warnings at the beginning as well, which I enjoy seeing. And this book definitely deals with a lot of things, having like I'll just highlight a few because it does talk about quite a few things, but it definitely looks at sort of like childhood trauma and indoctrination a whole lot, and this uses some tropes that I really enjoyed. I also felt like I didn't know what to expect going in, because I hadn't, like, the synopsis was never sticking to my mind, and I felt like it sounded pretty generic as well, but this has some tropes that are really near and dear that I really enjoy a whole lot, and it like leans very closely to another trope that I really enjoy a whole ton, and that I, while reading this, was like, oh, I need to look if there's sort of like a list with books that have that trope, because I really want to read something like that. And so this got pretty close to giving me that experience as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one a whole ton. Books that I forgot about. So I listened to Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Su Lin Tan. So this is a short story collection that basically has short stories at whichever point of time in the Celestial Kingdom duology. So you have short stories that take place before the first book, you have short stories that take place during or between the books, and then you have short stories that take place after the books. I enjoyed this one a whole lot. I will say, like, I did not have the need for these stories, and like if I would have, you know, if you would have told me like, what do you want to know more about, I don't necessarily think I would have chosen some of these as the sort of scenes that I wanted to see elaborated upon, but I did enjoy reading them, though I will say that, like, for me personally, the final story is like, I'm happy that it's just like a short story apart. I'm happy that they didn't include this in the original novel, because I just like to keep my stories more open, and you can like imply a certain thing towards the ending of the story, but I don't always want to see that being elaborated and worked out on the page. And so this short story kind of does that, and and for me that was kind of like, yeah, I prefer to not have this scene, but I'm okay with it being there in like a short story format, where you can kind of like, you know, it's not part of the main storyline of the book, and so it doesn't, in my opinion, or like for me personally, it doesn't taint the book then, or it doesn't taint my enjoyment of the book. Whereas I feel like if this would have been in the book itself, I probably would have been a little bit disappointed in the ending, because I would have been a little bit like, yeah, it gave too much of an ending. I would have preferred it to be opener, and so I'm happy with this balance, I guess, between the two. And then there's something else that I still need to talk about, right? Do I have to get up for that? Editing me will hate me, but I will just put it on the screen. I also finished during this month An Echo of Things to Come by James Eilington, and so I talked about the third book already within this video. And the second book, I will say, is sort of like the least favorite to some extent, in the sense of it is a book that made me really question my understanding of it the first time around. And as a consequence, because it had been a year since reading book one, I was like, yeah, I need to reread the series before I can read book three, because I'm completely confused. However, having just reread book one and then rereading book two, I still had the same experience. So it turned out like, it actually doesn't have anything to do with my understanding of book one. It is just supposed to be this confusing, because basically in book two, one of the storylines is a storyline of a character remembering scenes from their past, and these memories are out of order, and so that is part of the difficulty in understanding his storyline, because you kind of have to figure out where everything fits in, and that's kind of what I did after reading book 2, and I made a whole video about it as well. And then when you enter book 3, you get like a nicely written recap of it by the author. But still, I feel like it's my least favorite, but actually I also really enjoyed it, especially like upon my reread. I was like, okay, actually I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I remembered, because my focus was so fully on that one storyline that I wasn't following, that I forgot how much I enjoyed the other storylines in it, and so I got to appreciate that all over again upon the reread. And I also feel like while the storyline that I was so confused about is a storyline that of course is very frustrating to read about, and while reading I just kept on feeling more and more like I was not following along anymore. Having taken the time to kind of revisit it and kind of work it out, I also felt like, oh yeah, I really like that sort of tapestry that's there, and the idea of like the complexity of having to figure it out. Like not an encouragement to all authors to try and do that, but I did enjoy having that experience with it as well. But so that should be my March wrap up, and yeah, I am now at a TBR of 20 books. So yeah, I'm very happy with that TBR. That is my goal for this year, right? My goal for this year was to reduce the TBR to 20. I shall definitely say that my current goal is much more ambitious again, and so I'm actually hoping to have a nice reduction again in the month of April, and maybe a huge reduction. I'm not entirely sure. At the very least it will be a very nice reduction, but I'm hoping for maybe even a really nice one. But so I definitely had a great time with my reading this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!